I spent a year and a half researching and scripting exactly what would happen if Alice and Eugeo swapped places in Alicization. Welcome back to that story. Preparations for the departure didn't take long, as Alice had lost pretty much all her belongings in the fall of Rulid, and Kirito had only just recently arrived in this world. They didn't have any form of transportation either, so it's not as if they could just take a large amount of luggage anyway. Thus, all they took with them was the day's rations and the clothes on their back. This is apart from one small anomaly, which Alice would immediately question Kirito about.
So, where did you get that sword from?
Oh, this? It's the one I borrowed from the guards when we were holding back the goblins last night. I was going to return it this morning, but they actually let me keep it after I told them I would be leaving to get formal sword training in the capital. Apparently they wouldn't be needing it anyway, so they gave it to me as a reward for my part of the defense.
I see. How kind of them. But now you don't have any excuses not to practice.
Kirito sulked a little bit after being teased here. There was no better guide he could have gotten for this trip for sure, but thinking about how diligent he's learned Alice is with her own studies every single morning, she surely wouldn't let him goof off in potential practice time either. He may have just gotten himself into a world of pain that he didn't foresee. The banter continued back and forth as the two indulged in each other's company on a long journey to the capital. It wouldn't be an easy journey, as they had no money or supplies. The two would have to take on one-off jobs on the way in direct exchange for food or money for food. The same would have to be done for accommodation during the night if there weren't any stables or something like this that they could find to stay in. All the while never missing practice time for their respective crafts each day. This might sound like hellish days full of struggle to most, but for these two it would honestly be fun as they were doing it all together. It would almost fill them with this strange form of nostalgia for reasons that they couldn't quite pinpoint. On one such evening, the two would be staying in a farmer's lodge in exchange for their services that afternoon. As per usual, they would chat before eventually going to sleep. During this conversation, Alice asked Kirito a question.
Hey Kirito, I know you want to get formal training as a swordsman in the capital, but do you know how you're going to do it?
Kirito was dumbfounded by this question. A few moments of awkward silence passed where he was unable to come up with a good answer. After all, Kirito's goal was to get in contact with a RAF employee. His best bet for doing that would be traveling to the center of this world to the Axiom Church. From what he had gathered from talking to the villagers, his best bet for being able to achieve this was winning the Four Empires Unity tournament and becoming an Integrity Knight. Since he had decided on enrolling on the Academy through the reverse engineering of that goal, he hadn't had the chance to work out the logistics of that yet. But obviously he couldn't tell Alice this, so while struggling to form a response that made sense, Alice looked at him with an expression that just screamed,
I knew it.
I was planning to ask around for the location of an academy once we arrived, then perhaps go there and see if I can enroll.
Of course that isn't going to work! Did you think they let anybody just casually enter the Master Arts Academy?
Well, I presumed there would be some sort of entry test, like you show them a sequence of moves or something like this to prove you're serious.
I know you lost your memories, but you still never fail to surprise me.
Alright then, oh wise and knowledgeable Alice. Enlighten the poor ignorant soul that is me.
Only because you asked so nicely. For starters, you can't just ask to enroll at the Master Arts Academy, which, by the way, is the place where you train to become a full-fledged swordsman. Since you are not of noble descent, I presume, you must first earn the right to even take the entrance exam for the academy. That's right. You're going to have to first win a sword arts tournament. Or, at the very least, look extremely good while placing top 3, I suppose. Then you'll be able to join the city guards. Once there, you're also going to have to outshine all the other guards there in order to gain a recommendation letter. Once you have that, then and only then, will you be able to take the entrance exam for the academy.
Kirito was a mixture of shocked and disheartened at this revelation. He had to get into the Master Arms Academy. There was no other way for him to get into the church. Besides, what are the chances that a village would be attacked just after his arrival, as previously had been left alone for hundreds of years? Perhaps his quest, so to say, was to become a swordsman in this world. It would align with his previous experience after all. However, he could have never imagined the process in doing so would be this long and this painful. Alice noticed his downcast look and laughed before commenting on the matter.
Don't be discouraged. From the attack on Rulid and seeing your practice each day, I've gotten a pretty good idea of your skills. Honestly, I think you have a legitimate shot of making it far in the tournament. You're better than any guard I've seen, at least. A lot of the entrants will be other guards early in their career, or lower nobles. None of them should be exceptionally skilled beyond imagination, at least. Plus, you have something none of them likely would have. Real life or death combat experience. That's something all the training in the world can't get you. There's no way you'll falter due to the pressure of a battle.
This would only bring some comfort to Kirito, as his skill wasn't really the thing that was his main concern. This world seemed to be a derivative of the sea, so he could lean into all his experience from both Aincrad and Elfhelm to compete. Plus, he was highly doubtful that, at this level of combat at least, he would encounter a foe as ferocious as Asuna or Zekin. Kirito's heart twinged a bit upon recalling these memories. However, he would quickly shake it out of his system, as there was no use being depressed over something that he couldn't control. Instead, returning to the original topic, he was mainly lamenting the excruciatingly long process that was going to be going through all of what Alice just described. But he did appreciate the sentiment of Alice trying to comfort him, so he smiled and responded.
Wow, I didn't know you were such a fan, paying such close attention to me like this.
Yes, don't get too full of yourself. If you do end up faltering anyway, I won't be there to rescue you this time.
The banter between the two of them continued for a short amount of time. While Kirito's smug grin was ever provocative, Alice was glad to see that he no longer seemed upset. So after the two finished exchanging witty blows of the tongue, they would sleep soundly under the moonlight of the starry night. The next morning arrived, and with it, Alice was awoken by the sound of farm animals, something that she had become accustomed to by now. As per usual, Alice would wash before going through what had basically become her morning ritual at this point, waking up Kirito. He really wasn't a morning person, so if she was gentle with him, then he would just resist her efforts. Thus, recently, she had been finding it fun to come up with borderline cruel ways to awaken him, and the ice bath that she had just taken had given her just the inspiration she needed for today's idea.
System call. Generate cryogenic element.
A sadistic smile let loose on Alice's lips as she whispered the command that heralded Kirito's demise. She formed the art into a small lump of ice, then stealthily approached the helpless sleeping boy in a manner resembling an assassin, desperately trying to hold back the laughter that threatened to burst out of her at any moment. She slipped the ice into Kirito's back.
Good morning, Kirito. Did you sleep well?
After some protesting from Kirito, to which Alice found very entertaining, he would eventually get up and wash. The two of them would share breakfast with the farmer and then would depart. The Sword Arts tournament wouldn't begin until the 28th of the 8th month in the Underworld. We know that there are at least 4 tournaments in total. The one in the north, the one in the south, the one in the east, and the one in the west. The closest one to the door currently was obviously the North tournament, located in Centoria, which was the closest major village to Rulid. However, since the 8th month was still some months away, the two of them had decided to continue on their way to the capital, rather than turn back and go to Centoria. It would be suboptimal to make Alice wait for potentially half a year for Kirito to clear that objective that she had explained to him. So, rather, I think the two of them would continue their journey and Kirito would aim to enter what I speculate to be the existence of the 5th tournament, located in the center of the Underworld, close to or perhaps even in the capital itself. The reason I think this tournament would be located in the center is simple. Potential contestants residing in the center of the Underworld aspiring to be guards of center villages or cities would need to enter a tournament. Otherwise, it would be impossible for those who didn't originally have the sacred task of guard to become guards. So it would be this tournament that Kirito would aim to enter. This way, Kirito can work towards entering the Master Arms Academy and Alice can become an apprentice warlock at the same time. So the journey would continue. Hours would turn into days, days would turn into weeks, and weeks would turn into months, but finally, after it all, the two would arrive in the central capital. The two would start off by sightseeing. After travelling all this way, they wanted to truly take in the city and all the marvels it had to offer. Alice did have an idea of what she was in for from her studies of the world in general. However, even she would be in complete awe of the metropolis that stood before her. Being a country girl from a small remote village, even if she had read about it, this was beyond her wildest imagination. For Kirito, although he had seen many impressive cities of all types and sizes throughout his journey in the VR MMO genre, he would also be impressed yet again at the sheer realism of the magnificent city. After simply staring in silence for a while, I think the two of them would find amusement in each other's reactions. Centoria was split into 4 equal sections: north, west, south, and east. Since Alice and Kirito had travelled down from the north of the Underworld, they would naturally enter the north section of Centoria. From here, I imagine they naturally found themselves drifting towards the 7th and 6th districts, which was dedicated to business, but more importantly, food. Since it had been such a long journey, I imagine the two would decide to treat themselves to celebrate their arrival, trying out various food stalls with the small amount of money they had saved up from doing odd jobs on their way to the capital. I am certain that here Alice would be taken aback by Kirito's, let's say, unique taste buds. But that being said, he did more than often or not have this kind of strange read for what food would actually taste quite good, even if it looks really odd. So, if he manages to convince her to try some, she may gain a sort of unexpected appreciation for this weird superpower of his. However, they would be careful not to fill up too much on snacks, and find a relatively cheap inn to enjoy a proper meal. Even though it wasn't the highest quality food imaginable, I'm sure Kirito would still be overjoyed by it. Given that over the last few months, good meals had been inconsistent at best, sure, sometimes the people they did jobs for would be kind enough to share meals with them, but more often than not, they would just have to either buy cheap meals or ingredients or hunt food for themselves, meaning that they would have to cook. And if it was Alice's turn to cook, well, let's just say she certainly wasn't a prodigal child in that regard. So, to be able to eat relatively quality inn food would be a joyous occasion for them both. I imagine they would quickly devour their meal, share comments of adoration of how good it was before finally deciding on their next plan of action.
So now all that's left is to sign you up for the tournament and then for me to officially become an apprentice warlock. It's so close now, but it almost doesn't feel real.
I know how you feel. We spent so many days on the road doing various jobs for people. I got so used to it that it just felt like the norm, that there was no grander purpose to it all. It had its moments for sure, but I can't wait to sleep in an actual bed again. It's been way too long.
Stacia knows I agree. But don't get too ahead of yourself. You still need to do well in the tournament first. I would hate to be the only one enjoying the luxury of a nice, warm, soft capital bed, while you're still sleeping out in barns or some abandoned shelter.
Your mouth is telling me one thing, but the smile on your face is telling me another.
Don't worry. I think you'll be fine. As I have mentioned before, I'm pretty certain you'll be one of the most skilled contestants in the field. You should make the top 4 at least. If not, I'm sure it will at least be entertaining to see what sort of face you'll make when you get utterly outclassed.
Probably similar to the one you see when I eat your
What was that?
Nothing. I was just wondering which one we should go do first. The tournament sign-up or the Mages Guild?
I see. Well, we don't know when exactly the deadline is for the tournament signups, but it has to be soon, given the tournament itself isn't that far away, where I don't believe there is a deadline for the Mages Guild. So we should probably do the tournament first to be safe.
Yeah, that makes sense. Alright, let's go then. We still have to find a place to sleep tonight, so I would prefer to get this all done before nightfall.
With this settled, the two would enjoy the rest of their drinks before paying up and leaving for the tournament sign-ups. The sign-up itself would be a smooth process, and before they knew it, the duo would be heading off to the Mages Guild. Now, for clarity, we haven't seen the process of somebody becoming a warlock apprentice in the novels, so I can't know for certain the intricacies of it. What we do know, however, is that the Dark Territory had a Mages Guild, and most, if not all of the Sacred Arts users came from it. So, I presume the Human Realm would also have a similar setup in regards to having a Mages Guild and smaller churches that you can enter. Thus, I think for Alice, the process of becoming a Warlock Apprentice would be similar to becoming a page in the Master Arms Academy, meaning Alice would have to enter the guild, have to study there for some time, and prove her worth in order to be assigned to one of the Warlocks there. Then she would continue her studies while learning under them until she became a full-fledged Warlock. After asking around to find out the location of the Mages Guild, the two would start to make their way towards it. It would be here where something would suddenly occur to Kirito.
So how do you even enter the Mages Guild anyway?
Don't tell me the wise and mighty Alice is expecting something naive. Like, for instance, being able to just walk in and join them.
Ha! You underestimate me, Kirito. I would never do something so absent of thought. Unlike you, I have letters of recommendation from both my father, the village chief, and the head of the Rulid's church. Nice try.
The two continued to converse until reaching the guild. Once there, Alice stated her intentions to join the guild to the administration. After presenting her letters of recommendation and filling out the necessary paperwork, the process was done. She was to return exactly 1 week from the current date for the entrance exams. If she was able to pass those exams, she would be let into the guild. However, if she were to fail, then obviously she wouldn't be able to join. I presume there would also be some sort of rule that barred her from trying again for a certain period of time, most likely a year probably. So, with their 2 major objectives for the day cleared, all that was left was for the duo to find a place to stay for the night. So to that end, I imagine they would ask around at different inns or small shops if they could offer their services in exchange for a place to sleep for the night. A week passed, and at last, the tournament would commence. Now, even though the level of the competition is likely to be higher in the capital than it was in the Northern tournament, I still suspect Kirito would blow through the competition with ease. As in the original timeline, the only combatant that offered any kind of resistance was Eugeo, and that was only really because he had cheated and bribed a guard to give him a higher quality sword than Kirito had in that duel. And even then, Kirito easily dispatched him with a low level 2-hit sword skill Snakebite. After that, no other opponent even pressured him enough to resort to using a sword skill. So in the Centoria tournament, due to slightly higher competition, maybe a couple of opponents would pressure him enough to use like another one of those low level sword skills. But those would be few and far between, if any at all, so just like in the original timeline, Kirito would win his block of the tournament in dominant fashion, thereby earning him the right to become a Guard of Centoria. After the ceremonies had concluded and the accolades were awarded, Kirito would meet up with Alice, who was watching from the stands.
Good work out there. I knew you had it in you. But honestly, I didn't expect the matches to be so one-sided. Not even the final looked competitive. As a spectator, it was kind of underwhelming, to be honest. I was hoping to see you squirm a little. Are you sure you didn't regain your memories as a swordsman in the past?
If only. Then perhaps I would be living the luxurious life of a noble rather than sleeping in barns and having the misfortune of being subjected to your cooking.
I see winning this tournament has made you awfully brave, Kirito. Maybe I should cook for us tonight to celebrate.
Before that, how did your entrance exam go? I wasn't sure how long it would be, so I was surprised to see you in the stands watching the matches.
It was much easier than I was expecting. First, there was a written examination, followed by a physical one where we had to perform specific sacred arts. I feel like I was overprepared, if anything. I aced both sections and then came to watch the rest of the tournament. I have a few days to get used to the dormitories before my first lesson on Monday.
It's going to be weird spending the night apart after being on the road together for what feels like an eternity.
Oh? I didn't know you felt that way about me. Are you going to miss me that much?
Honestly, I just don't know how I'm going to get to sleep without the familiar, now somewhat cathartic sound of your snoring.
I do not snore! This is slander!
I'm sorry to be the one to inform you of this, oh mighty wise Princess Alice. But I'm afraid you do.
How would you know? You're the one who's out like a candle almost immediately every night. Practically like clockwork. In fact, the only thing I'm going to miss about sharing a room with you is getting to wake you up every morning. I do hope you won't sleep through your duties without me.
The banter continued between the 2 journeymen from Rulid as they reminisced about their journey and the many fun memories that they shared. Once more, they ate a hearty meal at the inn that they had yet to try at the food district, thoroughly enjoying each other's company before parting ways in the evening for the first time in a very long time. Alice would make her way to the Disciple Mage's dormitories and Kirito to the guards' barracks. The 2 would sleep soundly in their much anticipated warm beds, eagerly awaiting the next steps in their respective journeys. I think here, for a period of time, events would play out just as they did before, albeit with a few minor alterations. Kirito gained renown amongst the guards within 7 months through his feats of excellence. This would gain him a recommendation letter from the head guard in order to enter the Master Arts Academy. Following this, he would pass whatever entrance exams was required and finally enrolled in the academy. I'm going to presume that the academy works similar to like colleges or universities in real life in the sense that there are terms. One isn't usually able to just join in the middle of the year, so it would be like September now in the Underworld. This would also make Kirito a first year in his studies whilst Alice was a second year, something I'm sure she would find a lot of amusement in. Just like before, Kirito would diligently study the ways of the sword with assistance from his mentor Sortila. However, unlike before, he didn't have Eugeo, so there wasn't a friend at the academy he would just spend all his time with. Kirito wasn't exactly the most sociable person per se. It's not as if he was unable to make friends, it's just from what we have seen, he isn't really motivated to do so unless the situation demands it. For example, when he needed a guide to show him around Gungale, or when he needed a guide to show him around the Underworld, Thus, I don't think it's super likely he would go out of his way to socialize with the other students outside of his mentor, unless an event happens that forces him into a situation where he has the opportunity to befriend one. So during the week, since it was forbidden at the academy to venture from the premises during a non-rest day, I imagine he would get up to typical Kirito things. Practicing of course, but also doing his fair share of goofing off. But during his rest days, I think he would most likely meet up with Alice. They would discuss how things were going, what they had each respectively learned, and just generally enjoy each other's company, as they surely missed each other, having realised just how much they had been taking spending every day of each other for granted. Alice was in her second year at the Mages Guild, so at this point I believe it's most likely she would have already been selected by one of the Warlocks to become their apprentice. As a second year, she more than likely wouldn't have the same sort of restrictions Kirito had in regards to staying on site during non-rest days, as that restriction would be lifted for Kirito too during his second year. However, unlike him, she was really very diligent in her studies, so she would still be really busy during the week regardless. But it is precisely because she was so diligent that I believe she could find time to carve out of her schedule in order to visit Kirito at the academy every so often, assuming that they do allow visitors of course. Due to a combination of his proficiency in the sword from all his past experience and the fact that the swordsmen of the Underworld catered their fighting style more towards aesthetic appeal rather than efficiency, Kirito would somewhat easily rise to be one of the top students of his peer groups. Although the written tests would pose somewhat of a problem for him without Eugeo around to keep him on track. Regardless, his excellence and appointment as a valet of Sotila, who was a higher class noble and took on Kirito despite Kirito being a commoner, would earn Kirito disdain and jealousy amongst some of the nobles around him, resulting in him being the target of certain pranks or unpleasant behaviour. Alice more than likely witnessed some of these things occurring when she would come to visit him on occasion. I imagine she would be disgusted at the actions and would want to give them all a stern talking to. However, she would be called off by Kirito before she could, as he didn't really care about their petty, insignificant bullying. It didn't really get to him. The only comments that would even bother him were the ones levied towards his mentor for choosing him. But even that would not bother him so much that it would inspire any sort of reaction out of him. That is, until the most notable incident during his first year. That being the destruction of the flowers Kirito had spent so long nurturing as a graduation present for his mentor. But even that was resolved without too much discourse as Charlotte intervened with a prompt for Kirito to use Incarnation, allowing him to repair the plants and give them to Sortila as a graduation present at the end of his first year. Now, going into the second year at the academy, just like originally, Kirito would now be one of the academy's 12 elite swordsmen in training. He was selected as such due to ranking 6th amongst the top end of his peer group during the end of his first year. This awarded him the privilege of staying in the elite swordsman in training dorm. This was more luxurious than the standard dorm. The suites featured 2 bedrooms each, a bathroom and a lounge. Since there is no Eugeo in this timeline, Kirito ended up with an unknown member of the 12 elite swordsmen in training for a roommate. There is a chance that roommate could be a condescending noble with a gripe against Kirito for aforementioned reasons. However, a lot of the people we met at the academy were nice people, noble or not. Like Kirito's and Eugeo's mentor, for example. So personally, I feel like it's more likely Kirito would get a roommate that he could get along with at least. I believe they would more than likely become casual friends, but obviously they wouldn't form a bond as strong as the one he had with Eugeo originally, or the one that he currently has with Alice. Along with the privilege that came with being an elite swordsman in training, such as more luxurious dorms or the laxing of certain academy rules, Kirito now also had the responsibility of mentoring a valet. The valet picking system worked in order of ranking, so the first years would have an exam to determine the top 12 among them. Those top 12 would then become valet candidates. Then the elite swordsman in training would pick a valet in order of highest ranked to lowest ranked. So, the first ranked elite swordsman in training would get to pick first, the second ranked would get to pick second, and so on and so forth. Since Kirito ranked 6th, usually that would mean he would pick 6th. However, just like originally, he ended up deciding to request to pick last, making it so he wouldn't have a choice in which valet he ended up with. The reason he did this was to help shield his valet from any bullying that may have occurred from being picked by a commoner. Since this way, the valet wasn't really picked per se, they were just unlucky enough to be stuck with Kirito. The 2 that were left until last were Ronye and Tias. This was not because they lacked skill or anything like that, but actually just because of the 12 available valet candidates, Ronye and Tias were the only 2 born to 6th class nobility families, which was the lowest class of nobility and thus it made them undesirable in comparison to the other valets. Since Tias ranked higher than Ronye, I believe she would be picked by whoever was the 11th ranked elite swordsman in training, leaving Kirito with Ronye once again. Meanwhile, Alice was in her 3rd year at the Mages Guild now, meaning she will have been an apprentice warlock for a full year at this point. The academy Kirito was attending only lasts 2 years in total before graduation. We don't know the specifics of how the Mages Guild works obviously, however 1 year serving as an apprentice before becoming a full-fledged mage of the guild seems a bit too short to me. If I look at say a Padawan from Star Wars for example, it's common for it to take multiple years before becoming a full Jedi Knight. Sure, some of them only take 1 year, but it's much more common for them to take anything between 2 to 4 years. I'm sure there is still a lot Alice could learn from her mentor at this point, so I believe they would need to serve as an apprentice for at least 1 more full year. Since actual combat basically never happened in the Underworld due to the Taboo Index, she spent most of her days either studying the sacred arts or assisting her mentor with various tasks or chores. However, today would be a rest day, meaning both her and Kirito were completely free to do as they pleased for the day. As such, they had planned to meet up and catch up, since recently they had been a bit too busy to see each other. First, Alice had been assigned certain sacred tasks to learn and perform for her mentor, then Kirito had gone to spectate his mentor Sortila compete in the Empire Swordsmanship Tournament, then Alice had been assigned to teach a class at a local church for a week, then Kirito had to get adjusted to his new mentoring responsibilities. They just kept missing each other. But now, they could finally meet again, and they were both greatly looking forward to it. The designated meeting place was a local pie bakery. In the letter Alice had received, Kirito had sworn by these pies. Over their time together, she had come to trust his instincts when it came to food. When she had arrived at the bakery, she really wasn't surprised to find out that Kirito wasn't here yet. She was more than aware of his poor timekeeping abilities to the point where she actually would have been surprised if he was here on time. He had probably just overslept again since she was no longer there to keep him on track. She found herself smiling at the memories of the various tactics she employed to awaken the boy from his deep slumbers. About now, the waft from the bakery had fully invaded her nostrils. The sweet aroma caused her stomach to growl in protest of Alice's waiting. The temptation was a strong one indeed. However, she fought her impulses with every last ounce of her determination, as she was resolved to wait and eat together with Kirito as they had agreed. Some minutes would go by and she could feel her legs growing weak by the constant assault on her senses from the freshly baked pies. Each time one was consumed by someone who wasn't her, she almost felt personally insulted by the audacity of eating such a delicious smelling delicacy before her.
How is he still not here yet?
This thought crossed Alice's mind as her hunger quickly evaporated her patience. She knew he would probably be late, but at this point she almost felt as if he was doing it on purpose. He knew that she wouldn't have eaten yet, and that they were planning to eat lunch together. So maybe he thought it'd be funny just to make her wait in front of the store, knowing how powerful the aroma was as some sort of sick, twisted torture method of a joke. Just as these thoughts began to overtake her and the last of her willpower was about to break.
Yo, Alice. Long time no see.
Yo? What does that even mean? Where have you been?
Sorry. I ran into this little one on my way here. Come to think of it, you guys haven't had a chance to meet yet. This is my valet, Ronye. She has become addicted to the pies of this bakery ever since I brought them back for her to try one day. She was on her way here on a rest day to indulge herself until her stomach could take no more.
Don't introduce me like that.
Sorry. Anyway, I bumped into her on my way to meet up with you. And since we were both going to the same place, I thought we might as well go together. Ronye, this is my friend Alice. As you saw, despite her delicate appearance, she can be more vicious than the goblins you'll find in the Dark Territory.
How rude!
Hello, Miss Alice. I'm ballet trainee Ronye. I've heard about you from elite swordsman Kirito. I'm very pleased to make your acquaintance.
What a nice girl you are. My sincerest apologies for you having to be stuck with such a woefully inept mentor. If he ever treats you badly, feel free to let me know and I will sort it out for you.
No, that won't be necessary, Miss Alice. Kirito is an excellent mentor. His skill with the sword is unlike anything I've ever seen, and he treats me very nicely. I actually feel very lucky to have been chosen to be his valet.
Oh, really? Well, I'm glad to hear that. It seems you're settling into your new responsibility well, Kirito. Try not to corrupt her with any of your bad habits.
Have a little more faith in me.
After collectively laughing at the brief back and forth exchanges, here the trio would head inside and continue their conversation over the establishment's famed honey pies.
So, are you keeping up with your sacred arts studies?
I feel now as an elite swordsman in training, I have to continually evolve my sword skill in order to properly guide my valet. Sadly, this leaves me with less time than I would like to practice my sacred arts.
Don't use her as an excuse. We both know you just find it more fun to swing a sword around than bury your nose in books.
I can't deny that.
Don't worry, I'll be more than happy to tutor you again when I next visit. Maybe I could also help you out a bit too, Ronye. If you're interested, of course.
Of course, there have actually been some areas of my studies that I've been struggling with recently. To be able to learn directly from a warlock of the Mages Guild would be amazing. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm only an apprentice warlock still. However, I am confident I can help you with whatever you're struggling with. After all, with my help, even this swordhead managed to pass his sacred arts exams.
I hate to admit it, but she's right. Alice is an excellent teacher, Ronye. She somehow makes what previously looked very complex instead seem clear and even simple at times. I wouldn't be surprised if you managed to leap to the top of your class with her help.
I'm sure Kirito found amusement in Alice's absolute demolishing of the pastry delicacies, while Ronye could only look in wonder. Just like Kirito said, how could such a delicate-looking girl so savagely consume something like an animal? After taking a minute to savor the aftertaste of their indulgence, the three of them would chat the afternoon away, sharing stories from their respective pasts as well as buckling Ronye with laughter with tales from before they arrived at the capital. I think time would completely get away from them here, only truly realizing just how long they had spent when the evening bell struck. Having to part ways here would certainly leave Kirito and Alice feeling a little sad, obviously, but now at least that they had each settled into their respective routines, they did have more time to visit each other than they did previously. So ultimately, they would split here with the anticipation of seeing each other again when Alice would come to tutor both Master and Apprentice, just as promised. While walking back to the academy in the cool of the evening, Ronye mentioned to Kirito,
You know, I was a bit nervous at first when you told me you were going to meet with your friend Alice. You've told me before about what an amazing mage she is and how dedicated she is to her craft, as well as mentioned that she would have scolded you for doing this or that. So I had an image of a scary person in my head, but she turned out to be really nice. We had so much fun. I'm very much looking forward to seeing her again and learning from her.
Yeah, Alice is a really good person. As much as we may make fun of each other every now and again, there is a deep trust there. I'm glad you two got along so well. Don't ever be afraid to ask her for help if you need it. As she said, she helped me a lot with my studies.
time would go on, and things would mostly proceed as they did before. Kirito focused on improving himself in order to enter and win the Four Empires Unity tournament, to ultimately find a method in which to return or to contact the real world. As well as this, he would also spend time with Ronye, guiding her with anything that she needed help with. With the two of them being birds of the feather in a sense, this ended up being mostly sword technique training or theorizing. However, the occasional conversation about life or philosophical principles would also come up, to which Kirito would try his best to pass on what he believed in and help Ronye, in a way returning the favour for how kind his mentor had been to him when he was in her position. Between it all, of course Kirito also found time to just take it all in and enjoy life. For Alice, she was diligently improving her prowess in the sacred arts and rapidly ascending the ranks of the Mages Guild. She may still be an apprentice for now, but I imagine everyone around her knew that giving her the title of a full warlock would just be a formality at that point. She had already had the abilities required, it was just a matter of putting in the time. However, she still found time in her busy schedule to go visit Kirito and now Ronye when she could, to help them with their sacred arts as promised, or even just to hang out and enjoy each other's company. On this day, however, her visit would be for tutoring purposes. Both Kirito and Ronye would have placement exams upcoming soon, and she wanted to help them be in their absolute best shape for it. Kirito always informed his roommate of these study meetings beforehand, so as per their arrangement, his roommate would go help his valet in the training hall or somewhere similar. In exchange, Kirito would then help his roommate improve his sword skills sometime in the week. Alice greeted the duo, settled down at the table at the living room, and from there the study session began. Kirito's joy at seeing his close friend arrive was very quickly consumed by despair at the realization of what was now to come.
After spending some sessions with both of you, I've gained a clear idea of what levels you are at and what concepts you struggle with. Kirito is about where I expected him to be in terms of progression.
Somehow, I feel as if she just masked an insult.
Ronye, however, I was actually very impressed with. Sure, you get tripped up by certain things, and could definitely be more refined. But honestly, even without my help, I think you would develop well enough to challenge for a top spot by the end of the year at least. But with my special lesson plan that I have personalized for each of you, there is no doubt in my mind you will take one of the top spots. For sacred arts at least anyway. Sword for Brains over there will have to help you with the blade work.
I'm happy you think that, but the upper class nobles are so strong. It's hard to imagine myself surpassing them, this year at least.
You should have more confidence about your abilities. Trust me, I know what I'm talking about. I am a part of the Mages Guild after all. And Kirito's skill with the blade is exceptional, as you probably already know. You have quite the all-star team supporting you.
Wow, correct me if I misheard that, but that actually sounded like a genuine compliment.
Oh, hush you.
The afternoon quickly passed into evening as Alice guided the two through their studies of the sacred arts. I think Ronnie would be continually astounded by how much progress they were making, even if a certain individual would put up some resistance every now and again. It was around now that the trio would be nearing the end of today's study session.
Ah, I see it now. I can't believe it was so simple. Now I feel like an idiot for worrying about this. Thank you so much, Miss Alice.
Please, Ronye, I'm begging you, drop the miss. I already consider you a friend. You don't have to be so formal with me.
Sorry, force of habit. Well then, Alice, thank you for teaching me again today.
No problem. This is actually a lot of fun for me. Helping people you care for improve at something you're so passionate about is a wonderful feeling. Speaking of which... Hey Kirito, how are you getting on with that enchantment?
Silence overcame the duo as they bore witness to the black-haired elite swordsman in training, soundly asleep at the end of the sofa. They just looked at him for a few moments before bursting out in laughter.
Well, I guess it was to be expected. I did push both of you quite hard today.
Kirito is also practicing his Aincrad style today. He is determined to represent the Academy at the Four Empires Unity Tournament. I even got some pointers from him. He must be exhausted.
I see. Well, it was a good session. I guess I will pack my things and see myself out then. Don't forget to look over those scriptures I left you before next time, Ronye.
Here I believe Ronnie would look nervously at the floor while the inner conflict took place within her head. After a few moments of indecisiveness, she would eventually work up the courage to ask Alice a question.
Hey, Alice. Actually, would it be fine to ask your opinion on something?
Sure, no problem. Ask away.
Well, I have this friend who's also a valet. Her name is Frenica.
You see, Rayos and Humbert were treating Frenica poorly for two reasons. The first being simply to vent the frustration of being worse than commoners by power-tripping her. The second being the hope that this abuse would lure Kirito and Eugeo into doing something stupid that they could capitalize on. Now, Eugeo is not present in this timeline, so there is a chance that Rayos and Humbert wouldn't resort to doing this, as certain events that hurt their pride would have not happened, such as Eugeo's duel with Humbert, or Eugeo's growing confidence in his interactions with them. Also, at that time, the two of them had laid off directly messing with Kirito, as they were very spooked by Kirito presenting the flowers that they thought that they had destroyed to Sortila. However, with Kirito still chasing that top spot at the Academy, as well as his flippant attitude to their provocations, I believe there would still be plenty of times where their pride and view on commoners would cause this deep distaste for him. This, coupled with the fact that they were, well, quite frankly, just straight up leads me to believe that they would still abuse Frenica in this timeline, leading to Frenica confiding in Ronnie and Tears since the three of them are friends. Tears would still be outraged by this, due to her beliefs in how Noble should act instilled into her by her father, where Ronnie would still want to help Frenica due to her good nature, Kirito's influence on her, and his teachings about philosophical stuff to her. So, going back to current events, I believe here is where Ronnie explained to Alice the whole situation between Frenica and Rayos. How he was abusing his power as both elite swordsman in training and an upper-class noble to make her life at the Academy very, very difficult, demanding her to fulfill unreasonable and degrading tasks, riding the line perfectly on what he can get away with without breaking the rules. To the point where Frenica was actually seriously considering just quitting the Academy, rendering all her hard work null and forfeiting her chance to greatly improve both her own and her family's lives.
It's disgusting. Frenica doesn't deserve this. She's such a nice girl and works so hard to earn a valet position. I want to help her, I just don't know what to do. So, Kirito told me that throughout your travels to the capital, you seemingly always knew what to do. That if he was ever unsure, he knew he could turn to you and you would have an answer. I want to help my friend like that. So, if you may, what would you do in my position?
This would be a lot for Alice to digest. She had heard firsthand from Kirito just how rotten those nobles could be, so she didn't doubt Ronnie in the slightest. as shocking as this reveal was. However, she was unfamiliar with the specifics of how the academy operated and the rules in place. Thus, calculating what available options to her in this situation was just difficult for her to do on the spot.
Have you told Kirito about this? As much as I hate to admit it, he is probably much more useful than I am in this situation. He should be familiar with how the academy operates. And as a fellow elite swordsman in training, surely he has some influence for which he can use to resolve this situation.
I have actually told Kirito about this already. He spoke with Ryos about it. But sadly, it seems as if nothing changed since that meeting. I don't think there's anything more that Kirito can do.
Ronye reminded Alice a lot of her sister, Celica. As such, Alice had become quite fond of Ronye over their short time together. She really was quite delighted that Ronye had enough faith in her to entrust her with something so serious. So she really wanted to give Ronye a helpful answer.
From what Kirito told me about his experience, the valets are the top 12 students of the year group. Since you don't need to be a valet to become an elite swordsman in training next year, is she open to purposefully tanking her rank? She can still complete her goals next year, but by dropping out of the top 12, she can avoid getting tormented by her supposed mentor.
That would actually be a great idea, but sadly dropping in rank doesn't strip you of your status as a valet. It has to be agreed on by both the elite swordsman in training and the overseeing instructor before a valet may be dismissed.
Ah, that's unfortunate.
Alice spent some time in deep thought, trying her best to piece together an actionable plan. But she just didn't have enough information. So, after a few minutes, she would eventually reluctantly concede.
I'm really sorry, Ronye. I wish I could be more of help to you, but it's hard to think of something on the spot.
It's okay, I understand. Thank you for trying, and once again, thank you for your teachings today.
You're more than welcome. I will ask Kirito some questions, and then come up with something before our next meeting. I promise.
With that, Alice gathered her things, said her goodbyes, and then left. Once she had left, Ronye helped the still asleep Kirito to his bed, taking a moment to stare at the boy swordsman's face. Doing so would somehow dispel the eternal doubts that she had swelling within her. Instead now, a glint of determination appeared in her eyes.
I'll make you proud.
The next day, Kirito was awoken to a letter from Alice. Supposedly, she had written one at the reception and requested it to be delivered to him in the morning. The letter explains the conversation her and Ronye had the last night, going on to then inform Kirito that she intended to return late again this afternoon once she had finished her duties for the day. The intention being to discuss with him the situation, how the academy operates, what's possible, what isn't, all in the hopes of coming up with a solid plan to help Ronye's friend. I imagine Kirito was more than happy to do this, and from there, the day should play out as normal. Kirito may review the materials Alice left him, but I kinda doubt it. He will, however, definitely practice his sword skills, maybe even getting some sparring in with his roommate to fulfill his end of the agreement before letting them use the room for the study session. Alice should be fulfilling tasks set from her guild or her master, as well as keeping up with any advancements in her sacred arts. The day passed her by quickly, and before she knew it, it was time to go meet Kirito. Upon arrival, Alice knocked on the door, at which point an amusing thought occurred to her while she waited for him to open it up.
You can't be late if I'm the one coming to you.
And as if on cue, Kirito opened the door. Alice could tell immediately that Ronye hadn't arrived yet, as the lounge was noticeably more messy than when she had come yesterday.
No Ronye yet?
Was it that obvious?
I'm surprised. So far, she's always beaten me here.
I'm surprised as well. She has never been late to her duties as a valet. Not even once.
Oh, don't look so concerned. I'm sure it's just something minor, like her class has gone on longer than usual. Or someone asked her to do something that took longer than expected.
Yes, you're right. And I'm sure she'll turn up soon apologizing profusely.
That sounds about right. If anything, this works out in our favor. Now we have time to maybe even come up with a plan before Ronye arrives.
The two proceeded to talk about everything. What kind of person Rayos is, the relationship between an elite swordsman in training and a valet, the academy rules, punishment clauses, the conversation Kirito had had with Rayos before in an attempt to resolve the situation, how Rayos had essentially been using the rules as a shield to do despicable things and so on and so forth. Their conversation would be very abruptly interrupted by the bells of time-telling. These bells chimed on every hour, informing Kirito and Alice that a significant amount of time had passed.
Ronye still isn't here.
That's right. Now that you mention it, she isn't.
I have a bad feeling.
I'm going to go to the trainee's dormitory to check on her. I'll come back if she isn't there. You stay here in case she turns up while I'm away.
Okay, but where are you going? The door is that way?
The window is much quicker. It'll take me an extra 15 minutes if I go out the front entrance.
With that, Kirito leapt out of the window and proceeded down the nearby tree. Alice looked on with a wry smile, completely unsurprised.
Typical.
Alice waited patiently, thinking about the information that she had obtained from Kirito in the meanwhile. It was a tricky situation, but she thought she could perhaps think of a solid idea to try if she put her mind to it. Minutes passed by seconds whilst Alice deeply pondered everything. She was so entranced that she had completely missed the sound of the knocking on the door.
Oh, he returned already? I guess it was worth going out the window.
But when Alice opened the door, it was not Kirito, but instead, a timid-looking girl smaller than even herself. The surprise stunned Alice to silence for a few moments, but she swiftly recovered and asked the obvious question.
Hello, who may you be?
Hi, my name is Frenica. Is this elite swordsman in training Kirito's room?
Ah, so you're Frenica. Glad to finally meet you. Yes, you're right. This is Kirito's room. Although, Kirito isn't here right now. He left to go see if Ronye was in the dorm. He should be back soon, though. Why do you need him?
Oh, no, that's not good. I have to find him quickly. Thank you for your help. I'll be leaving now.
Wait! Hold on. Why are you in such a rush to speak to him? Like I said, he'll be back soon, and he has unconventional route choices. So if you leave now, you two will probably miss each other. Why don't you wait here with me? Maybe I can even help you. I'm aware of your situation. I'm so sorry.
You know? Oh, you must be Alice. Of course. I should have known. It's as Ronye said. You truly do have blindingly beautiful hair. Like the sun.
Thank you. I like your hair too. Please, come sit down. Talk to me while we wait for Kirito. We have both been thinking about how we can help you. If there's something I can do, I will.
Thank you. You're just as kind as Ronye mentioned.
With that, Frenica accepted Alice's offer. The two made their way to the sofa and sat down next to one another. Being this close to Frenica allowed Alice to see the visible trembling in her body. This girl was very clearly rattled. Seeing her like this only brought Alice further disgust for Rayos. From seeing Kirito's relationship with his valet, Ronye, as well as her own relationship with her master, she knew what a bond between master and apprentice was supposed to be like. To violate that sacred relationship and responsibility with such abhorrent actions was truly detestable. So Alice would gently reach for Frenica's hand and clasp it in between her own, giving her a warm smile.
Whenever you're ready.
Yes. Thank you. So, as you're aware,
Frenica proceeded to confirm with Alice what she knew about her situation with Rails, then explained how she told Ronye and their mutual friend Tias that if she had to continue fulfilling such degrading orders, then she would rather just quit the academy. Both Ronye and Tias protested this, saying how she should not have to throw away all her hard work because of one despicable individual, that instead they would go and appeal directly to Rails, leaving before Frenica even had a chance to intervene.
That girl! To make such a rash decision! I think Kirito has rubbed off on her a little too much.
the problem is, I waited for quite a while, but those two still haven't returned.
At this moment, it clicked for Alice the reason Ronye was so late.
Something must have happened. The conversation would not take this long. I will go to Rios' room and see if the two of them are still there. Kirito should return any minute now. You stay here and inform him on what happened, just as you did to me. Tell him I went there ahead of him.
Frenica nodded with anxiety and then told Alice which room belonged to Raos and Humbert. As Alice hurriedly approached the noble's domain, the information that Kirito had given her was racing through her mind. The only way Raos and Humbert could keep Ronye and Tias this long, to the point where Ronye had missed her duties as a valet, is through the punishment authority granted to an elite swordsman in training. However, according to Academy rules, only certain punishments are permitted, such as the cleaning of an area or a duel. None of those are really that concerning, but the problem is none of those tasks should have taken this long. So either something happened along the way that delayed them even further, or something even worse that's outside of her expectations had occurred. Either way, she had to find them and make sure that they were okay. The first step to doing that was going to where they were last known to be. When Alice finally arrived, she knocked on the door and anxiously awaited a reply.
So, it's you.
Excuse me?
You're the dame that commoner wannabe swordsman often hangs around with. What? Did you get tired of the peasant and wanted to lay with the real man?
Visible twitching could be seen on Alice's face as she restrained herself from escalating the situation. Her priority right now was finding Ronye. She could not endanger that, as much as the pure disgust for the man before her threatened to overwhelm her.
Actually, I'm Kirito's tutor. I'm helping both him and his valet Ronye prepare for the upcoming placement exams. The problem is, Ronye has yet to show up for today's study session. This is very unlike her, so we are currently looking for her. I heard that she was last seen heading to meet with you and your partner. So, do you know where she may be?
Yes. I think this actually works well. Let the girl in.
Humbert opened the door wide and stepped to the side, gesturing for Alice to enter, to which she would do so very cautiously. Upon entering, Alice quickly scanned around the room. It was a very spacious, large, luxurious lounge, similar to that of Kirito's. However, the most striking difference was the numerous extravagant and expensive decor or items laying around. Even just on the main coffee table, the duo appeared to be drinking from what was very obviously a high-end wine, the source of which could only be afforded to the most privileged of individuals. Even though Alice had been living in the capital for some time now, and thus had adjusted to a new standard of living, this sight was still somewhat really shocking for her. If she were to sell all the items in this room, she could probably feed the villagers of the now gone Rulid for at least half a year. What this room didn't contain, however, was Ronye and Tears. This revelation would bring some comfort to Alice, thinking to herself,
I guess they were just sent to clean the barracks or something after all. I can't believe they're so slow.
This really is an excellent wine. 50 years old from the Western Empire. How about taking a seat and enjoying a glass with us? This isn't something even those of lower nobility can access easily, you know?
I appreciate the offer, but unfortunately I'm in a hurry to find Ronye. She doesn't appear to be here, so if you could just tell me where she went, I would be thankful.
My hospitality is wasted. You are a bold one.
Don't mind her, Humbert. One that hangs around with commoners can't be expected to handle themselves with elegance or refinement.
At this moment, Alice clenched her fist behind her back and bit her lip in an attempt to stop herself from getting caught up in petty grievances.
I apologize for my impudence, but I really must find Ronye. If you have no information for me, then I cannot waste any more time here.
Straight to business, then. She certainly was a brave novice trainee to suddenly request for a meeting with the head, as well as the second-ranked elite swordsmen in training who stand above all of the students. I guess I shouldn't have been surprised by the behavior of a valet belonging to a peasant. However, she should really take care. That assertiveness could be impolite at times and disrespectful at others. Don't you think so too? Sorry, I didn't catch your name.
It's Alice. But more importantly, you did see Ronye then. Where did she go?
It really is a shame. A commoner entrusted with the duty of guiding a noble, though it's true she is of the lowest class. If she had better guidance, maybe she would have known not to treat me, firstborn of a fourth-class nobility family, with such disrespect.
In this moment, Alice felt as if the goddesses themselves had set up this encounter in order to test her restraint. She had almost laughed at the notion being pushed towards her. The audacity of this scum to speak about guidance and respect after what he had done to his valet is nothing short of pure comedy.
As such, I had to fulfill my noble responsibilities despite my complete reluctance to do so. It is my duty as an upper-class aristocrat to keep the lower-class aristocrats in check after all.
In check? Just what do you mean? What have you done with Ronye?
Well then, I think it's time to enjoy the final act of the day! We're lacking the guest of honor, but I grow tired of waiting. Seeing how she's here, he will probably turn up sooner or later anyway.
The two made their way to the bedroom, gesturing for Alice to follow. At this point, Alice was very agitated. If they kept wasting her time like this, then she would simply just search the suite herself and leave if they weren't here. That agitation would very quickly turn to shock, however, as she was rendered utterly speechless by what she saw through the now open bedroom door. Ronye and who she presumed to be Tess were bound by rope atop an extravagant bed. This was completely outside of the authorized punishments the Academy allowed, from what Kirito had told her anyway. Here, Humbert would state what the two valets' supposed acts of disrespect were, that now he had to enact his judgment authority of the nobles, allowing him to dictate the terms of the punishment as long as it doesn't violate the taboo index, of course. I don't think Alice would be as naive as Eugeo was here. She would have thought it was strange that the two of them were dressed in just bathrobes when she entered. After all, she had never seen Kirito do something like that when she came to visit him. But seeing Ronye and T.S. bound atop the bed like this, it now all made sense.
How dare you!
Alice moved to free the two, but as she did so, a very loud shout came from behind her.
Halt, girl! Interfering with a noble judgment is crime under Imperial law. Proceed any further, and you will be branded as a criminal.
Of course, torturing a friend of Kirito was something that brought these two lowlifes great joy, but I also think that they would secretly hope Alice would overstep her bounds. As in the original timeline, it was mentioned how they had expected Eugeo to simply commit an act of disrespect here, which makes it seem like they had a way to punish that act of disrespect. That punishment may not be applicable to Alice as she is not a member of the Academy. However, inversely, it may also even apply harder towards her for that very same reason. Regardless, for a crime severe enough, they were supposedly allowed to take action anyway, and the more people they can abuse to satisfy themselves, as well as hurt Kirito and even perhaps bait him into doing something they can punish, the better in their heads. At this point, the two nobles began to make their way towards the valets. With Alice frozen in place, her body completely ignoring her pleas to act, just like before, first Ronye and T.S. kept their composure. However, the longer this went on, the quicker their wills evaporated. Originally it was T.S. who broke first and called out for Eugeo to help. I believe this was the case because Eugeo was T.S.'s hero, thus she was more susceptible to calling out to him in this desperate situation. However, since it's Alice standing here before them, I believe it would actually be Ronye who would call out to her. As I mentioned before, they had gotten fairly close in this short period of time from their meetings together, but also I think Ronye would look up to Alice. Not admiring her as much as she did Kirito, of course. However, Alice being someone of the same sex as herself, as well as being this incredibly knowledgeable and seemingly strong individual, left Ronye with this sort of very deep respect for her, causing her to be more susceptible to calling out to Alice in this moment, as T.S. was for Eugeo. Meanwhile, a war was raging in Alice's mind. She needed to take action. She knew she could not allow this travesty to take place before her. However, the more she tried to do so, the more her body seemed to stubbornly refuse. Growing cold and lifeless, with each intended defilement that she could summon forth, her mind seemingly became more and more numb. At first she felt helpless, but then slowly, nothing at all, as if she was encased by a cube of ice.
Oh, please save me, Alice!
As I mentioned before, Ronye reminded Alice a lot of her sister. It's part of the reason they had managed to become quite close in this short period of time. Through her hazy mind, when looking at Ronye calling out to her like this, it would almost be as if Celica herself was doing it. So to see someone she felt that way towards in such a desperate situation enraged Alice. And so, this call-out became the spark that ignited the flame within her soul, burning away at the ice that immobilized her.
You bastards!
Oh, excuse me. Does the peasant sympathizer wish to say something?
Alice screamed to spur herself on. She could feel herself regaining autonomy over her body, and then her eye gruesomely exploded from her socket. With it, she felt as if she had finally fully floored, declaring viciously,
System call! Generate thermal element!
Before Humbert could even react, a raging inferno shot at him. With such force, the impact hurtled him towards the bedroom wall. There he laid collapsed, screaming in agony as the blaze consumed him. Reyes could only watch in shock as his partner was reduced to ash in front of him. Then, he turned to face Alice.
Magnificent! This is the first time I've seen someone commit a taboo! Oh, I was expecting nothing more than an act of disrespect, but to think he would violate the taboo index of all things! This is truly magnificent. The authority to judge was to be used only on lower-class nobles and those who live in my domain. But the restriction does not matter against someone who has committed such a great taboo.
Rayos drew his sword and moved to Alice with such excitement, it almost seemed as if he was mad. Alice knew she had to cast another sacred art to defend herself. However, it had taken everything she had to break her chains and cast the first one. Her complete mental exhaustion, as well as the shock from having just murdered someone, left her completely paralyzed. In fact, it was taking all she had to just simply stay conscious in this moment. So when he stood before her, blade placed at her throat. All she could do was watch her oncoming doom. Rayo staggered back, screaming viscerally. From his below right collarbone sat a sword impaled within him. Even in her labored state, Alice recognized it near immediately. The blade the former gods of Rulid gifted to Kirito for his part in the defense. As she made this connection, a hand patted her on her shoulder. She looked to her side, and there he stood. A boy clad in black, with dripping wet hair to match.
Kirito?
He gave her a brief smile to let her know it was all okay now, that he would handle this, kindly repaying his debt to her for saving him from similar peril all that time ago. Then, he turned to face Rayos.
Withdraw your blade, Rayos. I will not allow you to hurt Alice.
So, you finally arrived, swordsman in training, Kirito. Throwing your sword is a cheap trick I should have expected from a bumpkin. Now that you've also committed a taboo, I will not withdraw. Rather, I shall have your head, and then for dessert, I will have her!
Rayos swung wildly at Kirito, blade going straight for his neck. However, his movements were ragged in comparison to normal. The injury he had sustained was clearly encumbering him. Thus, Kirito was easily able to avoid the reckless charge, pulling his sword out of Rayos as he did so. Rayos roared in pain before turning around and activating his prized Norika-style sword skill, Heavenly Mountain-Rending Wave. Just like in the original timeline, Kirito responded with an evolution of his former mentor's sword skill, Whirling Current. The violent clash of blades resulted in Kirito severing both of Rayos' arms, at which point he fell to the floor and bellowed like an animal. Kirito first went to Ronye and Teus, freeing them from their binds and reassuring them, making sure that they were alright. Then he intended to use those binds to stop Rayos' bleeding. However, Rayos' excessive pride, as well as the fact that he had just been pretty much humiliated and maimed by a peasant, was causing a severe clash in his mind. It was a reality that he could just not accept, and the result was his floodlight collapsing in on itself, leaving behind a gruesome scene akin to that of a dying, tortured dog. Then finally, his screaming would cease and his body would lay, completely lifeless. Just like before, in the aftermath of this horrific event, Kirito and Alice would console both each other as well as Ronye and Teus, telling the two good-natured valets that they did not have to feel guilty, that this was the right thing to do, and it was a situation brought about by the disgusting behavior by the two now dead nobles. Since Humbert didn't make it out alive this time, I believe Kirito and Alice would have a bit more time to spend with Ronye and Teus. There was no point running away, however, as they had already been registered by the church's taboo-breaking search team. Sooner or later, an Integrity Knight would come for them. Alice knew that better than anyone. Besides, they were both exhausted anyway. Thus, they preferred to spend their final moments of freedom in familiar company. Eventually, however, the duo would be arrested by the Academy security. Since the day had been long and filled with tribulation, once within their cells, sleep would very quickly take the two of them. At this point, for now, events would follow fairly similar to before. Kirito and Alice would spend the night in incarceration. Upon waking up, Alice attempted to heal her lost eye. I imagine also extremely confused as to why it exploded in the first place despite suffering no damage. Much to her dismay, her attempt would be unsuccessful, as there were just not enough spatial resources in the discipline chamber for such a high-level sacred art. Around this time is where Azurika would arrive. She was an instructor for the novice trainee dorm and as such was Kirito's former teacher. He had stood out to her as an enigma, as he always asked questions none of the other former students even thought about or already knew the answer to. This, coupled with his unusual behavior and unique fighting style, led her to believe that there was something special about him. She had high hopes for him and thus wanted to be the one to escort him to the Integrity Knight. Originally, she healed Eugeo's eye here using a spatial resource catalyst. The The reason being is that she seemed to know the running of this world was not as it seemed, and that by breaking this eye seal, Eugeo could make steps towards uncovering the mystery behind it all, something that she had hoped to do in her youth, but was unsuccessful. As such, despite not knowing Alice directly, I believe she would also heal Alice's eye here for the same reason. Shortly after, it would be time to deliver the two of them to the Integrity Knight picking them up. Just before doing so, Azurika would wish the two of them good luck in whatever fate awaited them. Then she led the duo through the academy courtyard to the training area, the pickup spot for the delivery to the Integrity Knight. Originally here, both Eugeo and Kirito actually felt some sort of excitement towards the fact that they were about to meet an Integrity Knight, as they were both swordsmen and it was what they were striving to be after all. However, I think Alice would actually rather be somewhat disturbed by the knight as it was slowly descending for its landing. She is a mage and has no particular love for swordsmen or swordsplay, even though she does have a talent for it, ironically. So instead, all the knight would do was remind her of unpleasant memories, bringing forth shades of the intense guilt that she felt for years afterwards. But she felt that maybe, in a way, this whole event was just karma. Eugeo had given up his life that day in order to make up for her stupidity. Now it was her who had to give up her life to help another. It was almost poetic in its irony. When the knight finally disembarked, Alice got to take a good look at him. She was half expecting it to be the same one that came to Rulid. At that time, she wasn't able to see the knight in detail, but she could make out that it had grey armor, whereas the one standing before her was actually clad in dark blue. What stood out to her, though, was the knight's hair. Unlike the one that she had encountered before, this one did not bear a helmet. Thus, she could see his well-kept flaxen hair. It almost seemed familiar to her, but she couldn't quite place a finger on why that might be. The knight made no movement, instead simply staring in silence at Kirito and Alice, as if to say just its presence was enough to command obedience from its captees. Surely enough, Kirito would step forward.
From the North Centoria Empire Sword Mastery Academy, I'm elite swordsman in training, Kirito.
Also from the North Centoria Empire, by way of the Mages Guild, I am Alice.
United Centoria City Region, Integrity Knight of the Axiom Church. I am Eugeo, Synthesis 30.
Eugeo? Is it really you? You were executed. I don't understand.
Eugeo? You think it's the same one as the friend you lost?
That flaxen hair. There's no mistaking it. Oh, Eugeo, I'm so sorry. I never meant for that to happen. There hasn't been a night that goes by without that day being in my thoughts. It should have been me. If only I had listened, I would have given anything to undo that moment. I tried my absolute best in my studies. Countless sleepless nights. Searching, praying to find a way to go back and avert that tragedy. To think we'd meet again like this. Fate truly is twisted.
Alice.
Alice fell to her knees, tears streaking down her cheeks. All the guilt that she had felt towards that day, as well as the emotions from seeing her long-lost friend, had completely overwhelmed her. This sight was painful for Kirito. He knew all too well how it felt to lose someone close to you as a result of your own actions. The guilt it causes, and even what it drives you to do. It was something that nearly destroyed him. And even after he chose life, that albatross weighed down upon him. Until a certain someone reached through and pulled him out of that darkness that shrouded him. He needed to be that for Alice right now. As such, he knelt down and hugged her from behind, attempting to comfort her. As he did so, the until now silent knight finally spoke.
Compose yourself, prisoner. I have the authority to deprive the both of you of 70% of your lives. Cease the theatrics and step forth in an orderly manner. I would prefer not to have to drag you kicking and screaming.
Alice could only look up in her former friend in silence. There was no strength in her legs or presence in her mind. It was only Kirito's warm embrace and the whisper in her ear that finally broke through to her.
It's okay, Alice. I know how you feel. I also know what kind of person you are. So many people's lives have been altered for the better because of you being around. It may be difficult right now, but you have the right to think of those you've saved Let's obey his instructions for now. If we enter the Central Cathedral, even as criminals, we should be able to understand the situation a little more.
After allowing a few more tears to escape her eyes, Alice wiped her face with her sleeve, standing with the help of Kirito. As a result, the knight removed his hand from the hilt of his sheathed blade.
Follow me.
The two did as he commanded, following the knight to his dragon. There, they would be affixed to the beast via a binding vest that connected to the dragon's leg with chains. Just like before, at this moment the sound of a person running towards them could be heard, but unlike before, there would only be one person running towards them. That person being Ronye. As you can probably guess, T.S. didn't have a personal relationship with Kirito or Alice. She was incredibly thankful towards Alice for saving them, but she had already thanked them profusely during that time that they had been together just after Rios had died. So now, it was just Ronye who had felt this deep yearning to see her master Kirito and her teacher/savior Alice one more time. Bringing with her Kirito's sword. It may not be the high quality night sky blade as originally, but that guard's blade had a good amount of sentimental value at this point. The two had been through quite a lot together, and it had served Kirito well. Ronye would know just how attached Kirito could get to swords at this point, so she brought it for him, wanting to do anything she could to help comfort the situation for him. I imagine that she wished she could bring something of similar value for Alice as well, but alas, no such thing existed unfortunately. And so, just like before, she begged the knight Eugeo to allow her to give Kirito's sword to him. Much like Integrity Knight Alice originally, I imagine Eugeo could respect this desperate last wish from pupil to master, therefore allowing her to do so and spend one final minute with Kirito and Alice. They had already spoken the night before, but I imagine this still wouldn't stop the three of them from having a heart-wrenched farewell. Tears may even be shed, ultimately ending in a promise. Just like before, Ronye would declare with as much determination as Alice and Kirito had ever seen from her.
This time, it'll be my turn to save you two. I'll do my best and definitely become an Integrity Knight to save you guys. So, please wait for me. I'll definitely.
The tears cut off her sentence. Kirito and Alice could do nothing but respect her declaration and nod. It'd be at this time that Eugeo would declare that it's time for them to depart, commanding Ronye to stand back and whisking away the Rulid duo. As they were taken away, Kirito and Alice could see Ronye running after them. I imagine this would be painfully reminiscent for Alice.
So this is how it feels to be on this side of it all.
Thank you for watching the video. I really put my all into these bigger projects, so I would really appreciate it if you guys would like and subscribe. I want to hit 1,000 subscribers this year. That is my goal, and I'm trying my very best to achieve it. Please let me know in the comments below what was your favorite bit of this part. For me personally, I really enjoyed the banter between Alice and Kirito this part. I feel like I got to develop on it quite a bit, and especially the scene where she slips the ice into his back, that made me laugh quite a lot. I really liked the voice actor's delivery with that one. As always, I'll respond to all the comments I find interesting, and we can have a nice little convo about it. So with all that said, like always, I'll catch you guys on the next one. Bye bye.